Saint Augustine, Commentary on the Psalms, Psalm 6, Part 2. Turn, O Lord, and deliver my soul. Verse 4. Turning herself, she prays that God too would turn to her, as it is said, Turn ye unto me, and I will turn unto you, says the Lord. Zechariah 1:3. Or is it to be understood according to that way of speaking? Turn, O Lord, that is, make me turn, since the soul in her turning feels difficulty and toil. For our perfected turning finds God ready, as says the prophet, we shall find him ready as the dawn. Since it was not his absence, who is everywhere present, but our turning away that made us lose him. He was in this world, it is said, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. John 1:10. If then he was in this world, and the world knew him not, our impurity does not endure the sight of him. But while we are turning ourselves, that is, by changing our own life, or fashioning our spirit, we feel it hard and toilsome to be wrested back from the darkness of earthly lusts to the serene and quiet and tranquillity of the divine light. And in such difficulty we say, Turn, O Lord, that is, help us, that turning may be perfected in us, which finds you ready and offering yourself for the fruition of them that love you. And hence, after he said, Turn, O Lord, he added, and deliver my soul, cleaving as it were to the entanglements of this world and suffering, in the very act of turning from the thorns, as it were, of rending and tearing desires. Make me whole, he says, for your pity's sake. He knows that it is not of his own merits that he is healed, for to him sinning and transgressing a given command was just condemnation due. Heal me therefore, he says, not for my merit's sake, but for your pity's sake. For in death there is no one that is mindful of you. Verse 5. He knows too that now is the time for turning unto God. For when this life shall have passed away, there remains but a retribution of our deserts. But in hell who shall confess to you? Luke 16. That rich man of whom the Lord speaks, who saw Lazarus in rest, but bewailed him in torments, confessed in hell, ye so as to wish even to have his brethren warned, that they might keep themselves from sin, because of the punishment which is not believed to be in hell. Although therefore to no purpose, yet he confessed that those torments had deservedly lighted upon him, since he even wished his brethren to be instructed, lest they should fall into the same. What then is but in hell who will confess to you? Is hell to be understood as that place whither the ungodly will be cast down after the judgment, when by reason of that deeper darkness they will no more see any light of God, to whom they may confess anything? For as yet that rich man, by raising his eyes, although a vast gulf lay between, could still see Lazarus established in rest. By comparing himself with whom, he was driven to a confession of his own deserts. It may be understood also as if the psalmist calls sin that is committed in contempt of God's law, death, so as that we should give the name of death to the sting of death, because it procures death. For the sting of death is sin. 1 Corinthians 15:56. In which death this is to be unmindful of God, to despise his law and commandments, so that by hell the psalmist would mean that blindness of soul which overtakes and enwraps the sinner, that is, the dying. as they did not think good. The apostle says, to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to reprobate mind. Romans 1:28. From this death and this hell the soul earnestly prays that she may be kept safe while she strives to turn to God and feels her difficulties. Wherefore he goes on to say, I have labored in my groaning, and as if this availed but little, he adds, I will wash each night my couch. Verse 6. That is here called a couch where the sick and weak soul rests, that is, in bodily gratification and in every worldly pleasure, which pleasure whoso endeavors to withdraw himself from it washes with tears, for he sees that he already condemns carnal lusts, and yet his weakness is held by the pleasure, and willingly lies down therein, from whence none but the soul that is made whole can rise. As for what he says, each night he would perhaps have it taken thus, that he who, ready in spirit, perceives some light of truth, and yet, through weakness of the flesh, rests sometimes in the pleasure of this world, is compelled to suffer as it were days and nights in an alternation of feeling, as when he says, with the mind I serve the law of God. He feels as it were day, again, when he says, but with the flesh the law of sin. Romans 7:25. He declines it to night, until all night passes away, and that one day comes of which it is said, in the morning I will stand by you and will see. For then he will stand, but now he lies down, when he's on his couch, which he will wash each night, that which so great abundance of tears he may obtain the most assured remedy from the mercy of God. I will drench my bed with tears. It is a repetition, for when he says with tears, he shows with what meaning he said above, I will wash, for we take bed here to be the same as couch above. Although I will drench is something more than I will wash, since anything may be washed superficially, by drenching penetrates to the more inward parts, which here signifies weeping to the very bottom of the heart. Now, the variety of tenses which he uses, the past when he said, I have labored in my groaning, and the future when he said, I will wash each night my couch, the future again, I will drench my bed with tears. This shows that every man ought to say to himself, when he labors in groaning to no purpose, as if he should say, it has not profited when I have done this, therefore I will do the other. My eye is disordered by anger. Verse 7. It is by his own, or God's anger, in which he makes petition that he might not be reproved or chastened. But if anger in that place intimates the day of judgment, how can it be understood now? Is it a beginning of it, that men here suffer pains and torments, and above all the loss of understanding of the truth? As I have already quoted that which is said, God gave them over to a reprobate mind. Romans 1:28. For such is the blindness of the mind. Whosoever is given over thereunto is shut out from the interior light of God, but not wholly as yet while he is in this life. For there is outer darkness, Matthew 25:30, which is understood to belong rather to the day of judgment, that he should rather be wholly without God, whosoever while there is time refuses correction. Now to be wholly without God, what else is it but to be in extreme blindness? If indeed God dwell in an inaccessible light, 1 Timothy 6, 16, whereinto they enter, to whom it is said, Enter thou into the joy of your Lord. It is then the beginning of this anger which in this life every sinner suffers. In fear therefore of the day of judgment, he is in trial and grief, lest he be brought to that, the disastrous commencement of which he experiences now. And therefore he did not say, My eye is extinguished but my eye is disordered by anger. But if he mean that his eye is disordered by his own anger, there is no wonder either in this. For hence perhaps it is said, Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Ephesians 4:26. Because the mind, which from her own disorder is not permitted to see God, supposes that the inner sun, that is the wisdom of God, suffers as it were a setting in her. I have grown old in all mine enemies. He had only spoken of anger, if it were yet of his own anger that he spoke, but thinking on his other vices, he found that he was entrenched by them all, which vices, as they belong to the old life and the old man, which we must put off, that we may put on the new man. Colossians 3:9 and 10. It is well said, I have grown old, but in all mine enemies he means either amidst these vices or amidst men who will not be converted to God. For these, even if they know them not, even if they bear with them, even if they use the same tables and houses and cities, with no strife arising between them, and in frequent converse together with seeming concord, notwithstanding by the contrariety of their aims, they are enemies to those who turn unto God. For seeing that the one love and desire this world, the others wish to be freed from this world, who sees not that the first are enemies to the last. For if they can, they draw the others into punishment with them. And it is a great grace to be conversant daily with their words, and not to depart from the way of God's commandments. For often the mind which is striving to go on to go ward, being rudely handled in the very word, is alarmed, and generally fulfills not its good intent, lest it should offend those with whom it lives, who love and follow after other perishable and transient goods. From such every one that is whole is separated not in space but in soul. For the body is contained in space, but the soul's space is her affection.